everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be doing my November reading wrap up for 2022. I need to warn all of you right now that I'm really sick and I'm just going to be trying to film this as quickly as possible, I think, although I ramble a lot so it might not be very quick. I also am warning you of this because my ears are so plugged right now that I can't hear very well. And I don't know if my voice is sounding normal or not because to myself it sounds really weird. You know when you like go underwater when you're swimming and you go really far down and everything sounds very strange? That is what everything sounds like and it's really annoying. I know how I got this cold. I can trace exactly who it's from, which is fine. No hate to that person, but it just sucks because it's really bad and could be RSV, could be flu. It's definitely not COVID, but it is a cold that's very bad. Like I can't even be bothered to like get myself to look better for today's video because I really don't feel well. I just want to like go through this wrap up. Hopefully I'll have energy to like edit this and get it up in a reasonable time frame. I read 10 books this month. My average start rating was 3.3 stars. I'll tell you my least favorite and my favorite once I get to them. I'm trying to do like statistics now because I used to just like on the 2022 on Goodreads where you're supposed to like wrap up your like monthly or yearly thing depending on how you do it. I used to just like list every single book that I read, and then I read too many books this year and it said you can't add any more to this review, like it hit the character limit. So now I'm doing statistics instead of listing each book that I read each month. So that's why I'm gonna like talk about least favorite things like that. So the first book that I read this month I read because I went to a book festival where the author was there and I went to her like separately ticketed event that was like you had to pay extra to hear her talk because she's really popular. My mom is a huge fan of hers and I had one of her books on my shelf, so I went with my mom to go see her, and since I had one of her books on myself I decided to go ahead and read it. And this book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So yes, I saw Taylor Jenkins Reid at this book festival. I saw her talk. Well, I listened to her talk, and the ticket like price that I got a copy of Carrie Soto Is Back, her newest book, with a signed book plate that I still need to put in the book. So yeah, I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and I really liked it. I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it or not because here's the thing with me about adult books. I find a lot of adult books boring, which is why I don't read adult books as much as other people despite the fact that I am an adult. So I was like, this is gonna be hit or miss, and I added it on my bookshelf because there was bisexual representation in it and I ended up really liking it. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about this lady, Evelyn Hugo, and Evelyn Hugo became really popular and famous and she is an actress. But she is a lot older now, and so she found this writer who wrote an article that she really liked, and she wants this writer to write a book about her life. And one of the things that she's most known for besides acting is having 7 different husbands. So reading this book was sort of like reading a celebrity gossip magazine, and the thing is, I didn't like a lot of the characters. In fact, I didn't like most of them. And tons of things were happening here that I was like, ooh, I don't like those things. But I couldn't stop reading because celebrity gossip magazines, you can't stop reading once you start. So it was very addicting and intriguing, and I kept having to know what was going to happen next, so I read it really quickly. There are some parts in here where I got really emotional. It is just a phenomenal book. It's definitely not for everyone because it deals with some really hard stuff. So check the trigger warnings if you can, although the trigger warnings will spoil some major plot points, just giving all of you a heads up. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I've been rereading the Harry Potter series this year, so I read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows right here, and this is my favorite book that I read this month, and I of course gave it 5 stars. This was my second time reading this book all the way through, although I have listened to bits and pieces of the audiobook just growing up. I would just rent them from the library, stick them in a random CD and listen to it even though it was out of order. I was a chaotic child. I really love this one, of course. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me when I read it this time around is the story of the Grey Lady and the Bloody Baron. that really stuck out to me this time. This used to be my favorite one in the series, but then I realized I sort of liked Goblet of Fire better. But it is such a good one, and I feel like I read it quickly. I don't know if I actually read it quickly, but like, I feel like I read it quickly. Oh my gosh, I just realized something. I failed at marking this as being read on Goodreads, apparently. I mean, I marked it for the current time, but like the past time that I read it, I think I marked the wrong date. Goodreads really needs to fix its like reread thing and make it easier to mark rereads, because I keep messing that up, and sometimes I go in to fix my rereads on there, like the dates, and it deletes my entire review. Ay. Anyways, this one was 5 stars, as I said, and I was marking characters, but I didn't mark very many characters this time. Oh, there's so much dog hair on this. I don't know if you can see that, but when I like brush it, dog hair flies off. I didn't mark very many in here. Like, I was marking the 5 that I have been marking throughout this whole reread. But the reason why there isn't like too many Flyads, even though this book is huge, is because a lot of this book is just Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Harry and Hermione for a section of the book just like traveling, and so you don't see like a lot of the like characters that you would see a lot of the time in the other books when they're at school. That was really hard to get my brain to say what I wanted to say there. The next one that I read was Thigh Highs by Katia Rose. Katia Rose is an author that I've read 3 of her books so far this year, well 4 if you include Thigh Highs, and I liked the first 3 of the books I read by her. Like, they were phenomenal. And this author started out writing male loves female romances, so straight romances, and then in the past like couple of years she switched to sapphic romances, so female loves female. And this was my first time reading one of her straight romances, and it did not go well. I think something about this too is Thigh Highs was her second novel that she published, and you can definitely tell that her writing gets better the more that she writes. So her new books have so much like depth to them, and they are written so well, and they're so cute and awesome. And her Thigh Highs, the second book, just wasn't written as well. Like, it felt like it was written by a different person, and I think it's just because this one was so early in her writing career. Thigh Highs is about 2 college students who are in the like marketing major. They're trying to become marketers, and these 2 people, this guy and this girl, sort of like don't like each other very much. Well, specifically the girl doesn't like the guy because he is full of himself. He's known as like a player. She doesn't like him, and they have this assignment, this like big project in the marketing class that they get assigned to do together, and it's like randomly assigned, and then each group is given a topic. This girl and this guy are given the topic of lingerie to do a whole marketing presentation on. And I think the description on Goodreads gives more information for the like plot, but I feel like it's a spoiler if I would give more information. You can read the summary on Goodreads if it sounds interesting to you. But obviously romance ensues from there. This is considered new adult, and that's one of the things I really like about Katia Rose, because I feel like I am discovering new adult and discovering that I like it a lot recently. I didn't like this one in particular. I ended up giving this one 2 stars, but her other new adult books that I've read I really liked. So the reasons why I didn't like this book is because I didn't like either of the 2 main characters. They both felt really cocky and arrogant. I didn't like their writing very much, but as I said, Katia's writing has improved over the years. So my issue with writing this book probably has more to do with the fact that this is one of her earlier works. I also didn't feel like this book was entirely realistic. I mean, it's supposed to be contemporary, but the thing is, if a professor were to assign 2 people to do a marketing project on lingerie, it would probably be grounds for getting the professor fired, or at least getting the professor meeting with the HR team. There was also another thing that's like a massive spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you what it is. It felt unrealistic, but like, college students don't have that much money. That's all I'll say. The only thing I really liked about this book was how this book handled the topic of grief. I thought that was done really well. But other than that, I was not a huge fan of this one. But what I do have to say though is I feel like there is going to be people who like this book. The writing style and the characters reminds me of The Deal by Al Kennedy. So if you like The Deal by Al Kennedy, you should read Thigh Highs, because the writing is somewhat similar and the characters are similar, but the plot is so different that you're not going to get deja vu while reading Thigh Highs, but you will probably like Thigh Highs if you like The Deal. That is what I'll say, since The Deal is so popular. I don't want to like completely hate on this book nonstop because I know people will like it. It just wasn't for me. Next up, I listened to an audiobook because unfortunately I most likely got a concussion in the middle of this month. So when you get concussions, you're supposed to not look at screens and you're not supposed to read, but you are allowed to listen to audiobooks, at least according to the doctors that I've seen when I got a bad concussion. Well, it wasn't a bad concussion. It's just like I've hit my head so many times, but I only ever actually went to the doctor once and got diagnosed with a concussion, so I'm like following what that one doctor told me. So the audiobook that I listened to was part of the Circuit of Freaks series, since I have been slowly listening to that series over the course of like the past 2 years. This one was called Killers of the Dawn. This is by Darren Shan, and this was the 9th book in the Circuit of Freaks series, and there's 12 books. So I'm almost done. I have 3 more books. I ended up giving this one 5 stars, and it is one of my absolute favorite ones in the Circuit of Freaks series. I can't give you any information about what Killers of the Dawn is specifically about, but this whole series revolves around vampires, and specifically the main character, Darren, and the author series is Darren Shan, so it's like Darren is writing his own story. It's really hard to give you a summary of what Circuit of Freak is about because it's evolved so much since the first book, and even giving you information about like the main character would be a spoiler at this point with how far I am in the series. What I will say is this is a series that heavily involves vampires, and it started off being about a freak circus, and it really morphed from there. Killers of the Dawn is one of my favorite ones because it is so fast-paced and interesting, and it keeps going in directions that I didn't expect it to go in. My voice is starting to sound really weird to myself right now, so I really hope that my voice doesn't sound too weird to all of you right now. I can't even tell you about my favorite character in this book, because that would be a spoiler, because I'm that far in the series that like any little thing I say is a spoiler. Just read the Circuit of Freaks series if you haven't already. Don't expect like Twilight vampires, expect more like messy and like graphic and gory stuff, but it is so good. And even if like the first book doesn't capture your attention, keep reading, because I wasn't that impressed by the first book, but the more I kept reading with the series, the better and better it kept getting. So yeah, I flew through this one. I listened to it in 2 nights, and the audiobook technically is like 4.5 hours, but it felt like the audiobook was only an hour long because I loved it so much. And with the next book that I read, I ended up finishing my Harry Potter reread for the year. So the next book that I read is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, obviously the last book in the Harry Potter series. I didn't mark any characters in this book because none of the characters who I was marking appears or is mentioned in this book. I love Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, no matter what anybody says. I love it. I just do. I really want to see the play again, but it closed in San Francisco. I'm so sad because that was the closest location to me, and that's where I saw it for the first and only time that I've seen it. There are so many good quotes that I love in this play, like the script, and I don't care what anyone says. I just love this so much. I gave this 5 stars, of course. This was my 3rd time reading the script, and I've seen the play once, so technically I've heard all the dialogue at least 4 times, okay? And since it's wrapped up my Harry Potter reread for the year, I ended up making a donation to a nonprofit that supports trans people. I will link that nonprofit down in the description below. My reason for doing that is because the author is a massive TERF, so I'm gonna use every reread of the year, like each time I do the whole reread of the series, I'm going to use it as an excuse to donate to a trans nonprofit to fight back against the author's massive transphobia. Remember, trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are valid, and all trans people and everyone who falls under the trans umbrella is completely valid. The next book I read was one that I really didn't like, and I literally had a nightmare last night that the 3rd book in the series was on my shelf. It's not. Okay, I'm done with this series, I'm quitting this series, but it was a weird nightmare to be like, oh my gosh, the next book in the series is on my shelf, so I have to read it, because I have this thing where I don't get rid of books unless I read them. Yeah, hence why I have so many books from my childhood that I have no interest in anymore, but I haven't gotten rid of them. So this is a book that I got in my childhood that I just never read, so it's been on my shelf, so I finally read it, and now I can like get rid of it, meaning like I'm probably gonna put it in a little free library. This book was Shiloh Season by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. I despised Shiloh, and I despise Shiloh Season. My issue with this series is that there's so much freaking animal abuse, and it sort of feels like the next books are going to be working on giving a redemption arc to the abuser. Like, I hope that I'm wrong. I sincerely hope that I'm wrong and that the series actually doesn't do that, but that's the way that it seems like it's heading in that direction, to give the abuser a redemption arc. I also don't like any of the characters, and I find this whole entire series, the first book and the second book, to be extremely boring. And I mean, I'm not in my Annabelle phase where I'm like reading every single Annabelle book I can right now, but still, I don't like this book. I hate it. I hate it so much. The Shiloh series is about this boy who finds a dog who is being abused, and he starts to try and save the dog. That is where the plot starts off. It's very intense for a kid's book too. Like, this is a book that, like, I would imagine like second graders or like first graders, maybe third graders are supposed to be reading, yet it deals with so much animal abuse. Anyways, yeah, 1 star, didn't like it. The next book I read was my least favorite book of the month, and that was Dorothy and the Land of Monsters, which I also gave 1 star. Dorothy and the Land of Monsters is a book that I've had on NetGalley for like forever, and I just kept putting it off because I looked at the reviews and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna like this book. And it's true, I did not like this book. I found this book to be very boring. So this is a Wizard of Oz retelling, in case you can't tell, and there's like zombies and like shifters and vampires put in this series. Well, series, but there's only 1 book out so far. Like, on Goodreads it says it's gonna be a series, but there's been no information about the second book, which I don't really care because I'm not gonna read the second book. The author of this is also Garton Gevedon. I feel like I should tell you the author of each book that I read unless the author's problematic. So this book is supposed to be a Wizard of Oz retelling, but it felt like all the time was put into developing the romance between Dorothy and her love interest. And so the equivalent of the Scarecrow and the equivalent of the Lion are basically like shoved to the side, given no character development. So it really felt like they were trying more to do like a romantic story, and it's just not what it was pitched as, you know? And it doesn't do good as a retelling if you take 2 of the main characters from the series and just shove them to the side and give them no time on the page, give them no character development. There was also conversations that were repeated in here non-stop, unnecessarily, like, should Dorothy or should she not fight? That was repeated 10 freaking times, this whole long dialogue about it. And also there's the issue where Dorothy's boots, which are the equivalent of Dorothy's red shoes, made her basically a god, so she didn't have to have any character development. She didn't have any character development because these boots did everything for her. I could continue ranting about this, but I'm gonna stop there. You can see my full thoughts on it on Goodreads if you want. I just hated this book, and I feel like people who like the Wizard of Oz stories aren't gonna really like Dorothy and the Land of Monsters. I would only say that you should read this book if you're trying to read every single retelling that exists in the world. But yeah, I hated this one, but I finished all my NetGalley books with this one, so I went ahead and I requested a ton more, and I got accepted for like, I think my total's up to 21 now that I have to read. But hopefully they will be better than Dorothy and the Land of Monsters. And then I read Miss Peregrine's Museum of Wonders, an indispensable guide to the dangers and delights of the peculiar world for the instruction of new arrivals by Ransom Riggs. So, in case you don't know, different fantasy series have different like guidebooks to go along with them once they get to like a certain length. Like Twilight has one, Shadowhunters, like Mortal Instruments, that world has one. Harry Potter has some, like Fantastic Beasts, Quidditch Through the Ages. So this is basically just one of that type. It reads as if it's like a textbook or like a guidebook for people in this world, specifically for people who are new to the peculiar world, like they just discovered their peculiarity. That's a really hard word to say. And it's written by Miss Peregrine, and then there's little notes from her as if she gave this book to Jacob. I found some stuff in here to be interesting, like specifically there was a romance story in here that I really liked, but I found the majority of this to be sort of like reading a textbook, and that made it so a lot of this wasn't very enjoyable. I think the main purpose of this book seemed to just be for Ransom to show off more of his antique photos that he's collected. I gave this one 3 stars. I don't think that people will like this unless they are a hardcore Miss Peregrine's fan. Also, don't read this one if you haven't finished the complete series because there is a few spoilers in here. Not too many, but there is some. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. I thought like there was parts about it that I liked, but there was also parts that felt like I was reading a textbook for school. And so I thought it was like overall slightly enjoyable, but could have been a lot better. And then I read Agretzko Down the Rabbit Hole, which is a Agretzko graphic novel, and I have read like a lot of these. I don't know how many I've read. I know that I have 2 left to read out of the ones that are out right now. Let me find you the author right now really quickly before I get too much farther. Okay, it is written, illustrated, and lettered by Patabot. The colors are by Andrew Dahlhaus. Yeah, so Agretzko Down the Rabbit Hole is like an additional episode of Agretzko, so that's basically what these graphic novels are. They're just basically like reading additional episodes of Agretzko, the anime, that is a Netflix original. This one obviously follows sort of like Alice in Wonderland vibes. It's sort of like a retelling in some sense, but I find that I really like Alice in Wonderland stories when I'm watching them on a screen. So like I love all the movies and I love all the like movies that are simply retellings, but ones that are written I struggle with more, so like I struggle with this one. And I also felt like this one is such a short length that you jumped from event to event to event without being able to fully be like immersed in each like dreamscape, each like setting, you know? So I gave this one 3 stars. My reason for giving this 3 stars, despite the fact that I had so many issues with it, is I love the artwork so much, and like I overall really liked spending time with the characters. I just felt like the other Agretzko graphic novels were a lot better. So yeah, this is a 3-star read for me. I would recommend reading the other Agretzko graphic novels, but not necessarily reading this one unless you are an Alice in Wonderland fan. And the final book that I read this month is another one with drawings in it, and it is One Punch Man Volume 3. The story was created by One, and the art was created by Yuzuki Murata. So, see, it's a manga. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, like I gave the previous 2 in this series. I find this series to be very enjoyable, but it lacks depth, but it is so good, and I literally love Genos so much. His, like, character design is so freaking cool. So One Punch Man follows this guy, Saitama, and Saitama is, like, way too powerful. So he can't find anyone that puts up a good challenge for him to fight, and Genos is like, oh my gosh, this is the most powerful hero in the entire world. I need to learn how he got that powerful. So it's sort of funny because Saitama is like so powerful that like he lacks emotion and he sort of gets like bored in life, and Genos is like worshipping him as if he's a god, and it's like an interesting story, and it's like this world in which there's monsters and there's all these heroes to defeat the monsters. So it's like funny, it's humorous. I would recommend it, but just don't expect anything super deep. You're not gonna read this and get a new perspective on life, but it is really enjoyable, and I definitely will be continuing on with this series. So that was all for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope the next time that I talk to all of you, I am not sick. Being sick is not fun. It's been rough these past few days, and I really hope that this sickness goes away. Specifically, I need my ear pain to go away, because that's the worst part of this whole virus that I have. So I am on like all the social media platforms, so feel free to go follow me. I recently got Hive. I don't really post too much there, but I did get Hive. I have like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. I'm more active on the other social medias right now because I'm dealing with my dog who is having kidney failure, so that makes it so it's hard to find time to film videos and stuff. But yeah, I hope all of you are having a great start to your December. I hope all of you had a great month in November. I hope all of you had a fun time reading in November, and I hope all of you have some awesome reads in December. It's the last month of 2022. It feels really weird to say that, but we are so close to the end of the year. Anyways, talk to all of you later. Goodbye.